Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to the Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a wife, a busy mom of three, and the founder of the cutting edge and award-winning supplement brand Accelerated Health Products. This podcast is more than just a source of information. It's a community for you and those looking to optimize their health. I release new episodes live every Monday and Tuesday and a bonus one on Thursday. So remember to subscribe and add to your playlist so you never miss a show, and join my free health group coaching on Telegram. There is no downside. It's a continuation of what we talk about every week. And I answer your questions. I post daily and you continue to learn. The details can be found on my website, sarabantahealth.com. And my goal is to reach everyone who needs me with my message of healing. So if you could help me by sharing this podcast with a few friends and loved ones, together we can empower each other on our journey to optimal health. And today we are talking about histamines and histamine intolerance. You might have it and you don't even know it. We're going to talk about the symptoms to look out for, and more people than ever are suffering because of some new things in our environment in the last 4 years. And we have Stephen Wright back. I love his supplements and I love the way he talks so that you can learn and understand from his personal story and his science. Welcome, Stephen. How are you today?
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me back.
I'm super excited. Love your supplements. They are, I just was packing for a trip that I'm going on, and you better believe they are all in my little baggies that I'm taking with me. And I'm taking extra because there's always someone in my family that says, "Hey, Mom, I forgot my X, Y, and Z. Do you have any extra?" And so they need all of them as well. So I'm super excited to have your supplements because, you know, when I hit my rock bottom, it was all about my gut. The gut was the main issue. And up until maybe a year ago, I was 80% there, and I still had bloat. I still wasn't like perfect in that gut area. I would get food poisoning a lot, you know, E. coli or salmonella. And now I feel like knock on wood, I haven't had any of those issues in a while. And one of your supplements is a huge game changer, and that's the HCL Guard, which we talked about last time we were here. But today we're talking about histamines. So why don't you tell everybody what they should be looking for? Maybe they don't even know if they have histamine intolerance, and what histamines are even supposed to do in the body, because obviously they have a function.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was a histamine denier. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, and nor did I think I really had it. Lo and behold, the symptoms were everywhere for me, and throughout my history, my health history as well. And I don't know why it took me so long to realize that I have some histamine intolerance, some sensitivities there. So, if you're like me, I understand. If you're like wondering what this is, let's just run through some brief things that are definitely related to histamine intolerance. And this is from the scientific literature. So a few things are: if you suffer from migraines and repeated headaches, if you suffer from ADHD, if you suffer from fibromyalgia, if you suffer from seasickness or car sickness, like basically balance related things related to, especially to moving. If you struggle with sensitivities to foods in your environment, and especially if they're related to what most people would call is like a almost immediate reaction, meaning like you walked into a new room, or you just changed your environment, you just went into the car, you just started eating, and like literally at the end of the meal, you're feeling like brain foggy, your heart maybe starts beating a little bit faster. You start to notice like flushness, maybe on your cheeks, or blotchiness on your skin. any of these symptoms, you get like immediate phlegm and congestion. All of these are all kind of related to, and you can think about it like allergies, right? Like allergy season, histamine release. We take antihistamines to try to stop that. And so anything that feels like that is an abundance of histamine kind of flooding your system in like hitting different parts of your system. And what we want to do is try to figure out, can we correct the histamine equation? And how do we do that?
Right. So those are the symptoms to look for. And I've noticed in the last 4 years, what we've realized is the spike protein actually worsens histamine response. And some of the foods that I've talked about before, and if you can go to my accelerated food guide and look at the foods that are green light and okay to eat, but the sulfur foods, that's the healthy cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower, that worsens histamine response. In addition to backing up your sulfur detoxification pathways, the amyloids found in proteins like chicken and turkey and pork, those actually worsen the histamine response. There are also those proteins that don't get broken down and used in the body. And then oxalates make the histamine response even worse. So all of these things are playing together, and you might not even care about any of that. But the bottom line is that more people than ever are suffering from histamine response. So how does this differ from allergies? Because I've got a friend that says, she takes all of my supplements. She takes one medication, and that's an antihistamine or an anti-allergy medication. Could she just take an antihistamine supplement instead?
Yes and no. The body's complex. We're complex creatures as individuals. Like you said, you could be like kind of normal and like not, you're like, I don't have a histamine problem. And then it could be like Thursday and it could be girls' night, and you do this once a month with your girls. You go out to a restaurant and you have an appetizer that is cheese and wine and a little bit of, like you said, some higher histamine foods. And then the next day you wake up and you just have a banging headache and your skin's all blotchy and you just can't think, or maybe even later that night, you can't sleep. And you're like, oh, it's definitely the wine. It's got to be the alcohol, but it probably wasn't. You just your baseline histamine levels were okay. And you just happened to do a bunch of things all together that not only trigger histamine, but also inhibit an enzyme called diamine oxidase, DAO, which is what is the majority of the breakdown of histamine. And so you have these two sides of the equation where we make a lot of histamine and we'd like to limit how much histamine we make. We don't want to make too much. We don't want to make too little. And then we want to have the appropriate amount of DAO to break down histamine. Antihistamines work by essentially attaching to various receptors on various cells and blocking the entrance of histamine into the area. It doesn't necessarily make histamine go away. It doesn't degrade histamine, and it doesn't necessarily stop the production. Instead, it sort of stops the symptoms of too much histamine. And so depending on the person and how they're trying to handle their health, they can be helpful or they can be a crutch.
Okay. So you talked about some of the signs to look out for if you have histamine intolerance. But like you said or mentioned, there's a reason for histamine. So what is the purpose of them and why do we want them? Because it's Goldilocks, not too little, not too much, right? So what is the purpose of these histamines?
Yeah, histamines are just like estrogen and cortisol and testosterone. Too much, not good. Too little, not good. And so histamine is a very important signaling molecule throughout the body. It is absolutely essential in creating stomach acid. It's part of the signal that sort of kicks off the stomach acid production for digestion. It's critical for signaling down the immune system pathways and the inflammatory pathways. Again, we want to have the ability to alert the body that there's a change in the environment, that there's something bad that might be coming in, but we want that signal to be appropriate to what's happening, and we want it to shut off quickly. And so histamines you can find receptors in the brain, the circulatory system. That's why the symptoms are all over, right? So basically what that's suggesting is like there's receptors in your heart, there's receptors in your brain, there's a ton of receptors in your gut. And so that's how these various parts, that's where the symptoms kind of show up in those various areas. So like you said, the principle is Goldilocks. Like we want the right amount, and we want the ability to have some capacity to not be redlining all the time, right? We want to be able to have some red wine and not have a histamine response to it. That's kind of like normal. If you have like any sort of fermented food and you immediately have symptoms, that's typically a histamine response. Most humans should be able to tolerate fermented foods. And so we want that capacity to be able to tolerate a increase in histamine production without a cascade of symptoms that happen.
So a little insight to what I've experienced, and I love how God uses me as an example to share. I was having blurred vision in my left eye on and off for the last year, and the inflammation I could tell would get worse with certain foods, with screen time, with stress. But then there were times where it just wouldn't make sense why it would come and go. But what I had was the varicella virus was triggered in my body from the spike protein and what we've been experiencing. And a lot of people are having symptoms of varicella virus. So just look out for that, and optic nerve issues. But histamines were making it much worse. And for some reason, I had forgotten eggplant was on the high histamine list. And I ate some for the first time in 3 years. So when I ate it for the first time in 3 years, I ate a lot because I had missed it. And oh my goodness, my vision went horrible. And then my bloat, it was like I had told you that I haven't had bloat symptoms in over a year, and my gut has been pretty darn good, except for that morning. And I thought, okay, this is a sign that I should not be eating this, and realized that I needed to be more careful with high histamine foods. And I never had to be careful with high histamine foods ever before in my life. So it just shows you that these foods that we're talking about, and I mentioned sulfur foods and oxalates and amyloids, some of those are hard no's for me, but it also depends on your current state of health. I was in a very compromised position, so I couldn't even eat white fish that is high histamine. Whereas today, totally fine. And of course, I take my enzymes, my HistaHarmony, with those high histamine foods when I'm eating it. But it just shows that you need to be very much your own doctor and in tune with your body's signals, because no one else is going to be able to do that for you. Now I'm totally fine. And I also have my HCl guard as well that helps with just that stomach acid. And that is a question, because you're saying that histamines help produce stomach acid. So the logic would be, oh, if I have high histamines, then I have a lot of stomach acid. So then I probably wouldn't need HCl guard if I'm suffering from high histamine. But that might not be true. And can you tell us why?
Yeah, no, these are great questions. So that is probably unlikely. And the reason why is because there are 4 different types of histamine receptors, and histamine kind of flows wherever it flows. And so there's a very specific pathway for creating stomach acid. It typically starts with you smelling food like that. The smell starts to trigger gastrin and histamine production for stomach acid. What that doesn't mean is that, like, let's say you have let's say that you meet the criteria. You have, you said yes to at least a few of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the show, or some of the things you've mentioned, Sarah. The chances are your histamine bucket's high, if not overflowing. And actually, unfortunately, most people who have this also end up having low stomach acid. Now, I don't know exactly the mechanism there. I don't think anybody does. It's never been tested that I've seen. But essentially, partly what's happening is that the histamines are flowing throughout the entire body versus being broken down inside the gut and in and around the gut. So I mentioned that enzyme DAO. That's predominantly made by the villi. It's a brush border enzyme inside your small intestine. And so there should be histamine production in and around the small intestine. That is typically a separate process from the smelling histamine and the creation of stomach acid histamine process. So There could be some overlap. I can't explain how it could be one way or the other. I think it's a little too complicated from my understanding of the histamine biochemistry. But I'll just say from a clinical standpoint, just having an overabundance of histamine or identifying as mast cell activation or histamine intolerance does not mean that that you have great stomach acid or too high a stomach acid. In fact, I usually find it the opposite, which is that the majority of the people who have histamine intolerance issues also have things like low stomach acid.
So by taking the DAO enzyme, you are not lowering your stomach acid. Would that be correct?
That's true. Yep.
Okay. So that's not going to affect your stomach acid. That's really interesting. And you talk about the fact that the DAO enzyme is there to help break down your histamines in your food, but what is it doing if you take it away from food?
So some of it's going into your blood, and it's helping to try to mop up any histamines that are floating around. So that's where you have these practitioners out there. And again, for what I'm about to say, please be an adult. If you feel like you're in a life-threatening situation, stop what you're doing. Go to the hospital, get some support, take a Benadryl, whatever. This is not a substitute for a EpiPen or Benadryl or anything like that. Be an adult. However, for some practitioners, they'll actually encourage you, like if you're about to get in a car ride and you're starting to get car sick, they'll have them take 4 of our DAOs, and it almost immediately sort of like corrects the histamine imbalance, and they're able to ride in the car. The same is true for migraines. If you feel one coming on, again, this is not a treatment for migraines, but it helps stop the spread if it is a histamine derived migraine. Similarly, potentially for ADHD as well as for fibromyalgia, there's a histamine component in these conditions, and you can take it away from food. According to the research, it's not going to be applicable for every person and everybody because these issues are not directly caused just by histamine, right? It's a complex series of different things that trigger these issues. But if histamine is like the tipping point for that day, you could get relief by taking it away from food and trying to calm that pathway down. Now, again, it won't work every single time because every single trigger is probably not histamine for you, which is why typically we say to take it like prophylactically, take it every day. If you're somebody who's struggling with this, and you'll know like literally in probably 7 to 14 days, especially if you're journaling, if this is reducing the number of like incidents that you have. And if it's one of those things that can like there's people that we know that have like, they get like it's summertime, right? So they can get a welt, like a massive welt from a mosquito bite. Everybody has a reaction from mosquito bites. But like, if you're someone who's like just goes crazy, like that's suggesting an improper histamine release upon that mosquito bite. And so you could try taking DAO before you go out to the campfire and see, maybe you don't welt up like you usually do. That could be a possibility for you to test. Everybody's body's different. So it's gotta be, you gotta kind of test and try to figure it out.
We had Karen Krishnan on last week talking about leaky gut and leaky skin, and talking about the microbiome of the skin as well. And I know histamines can cause issues with skin and rashes and that sort of thing. How is histamine related to leaky gut and leaky skin?
Well, in my model of leaky gut, there's actually 5 layers to the leaky gut. And one of the layers is the mucosal layer, and that, along with the microbiome layer, are kind of protecting the gut wall, if you will, the layer of gut cells. In that layer of gut cells, it's not just one type of cell, it's all kinds of different cells. And some of those cells are mast cells. And mast cells are the cells that release the majority of histamine. So if you have a patchy microbiome, if you have a dysbiotic microbiome of a bad makeup, or if you have a thinned mucosal thickness, the mucosal thickness is kind of like it's like a bubble almost. It's like a springboard that's kind of like keeping things away from the cells, because the mast cells' job are literally just to sense what's coming at it and then release histamines in response. And so we actually want there to be a space between the mast cells and whatever's happening. Otherwise, it'll start reacting to broccoli and beef and fish and everything. And so part of this process is if the mucosal membrane gets thinned out, if the microbiome gets thinned out, now there's too much histamine being made on a daily basis to almost anything. And that histamine is a signaling molecule. It's an inflammatory signaling molecule. And if it's going off all day long, every day, it's drawing resources into this area in order to take care of whatever problem could be happening. In this case, it could be a problematic beef molecule, broccoli, or maybe it is a toxin or something, a bacteria that got through the gut wall. But this process creates collateral damage. And it also triggers the immune system to be a little hypervigilant. And the longer it goes on, the more hypervigilant the immune system becomes, because it's almost like it starts getting down this one way of doing things. And the longer that goes on, that's just the way we do things around here, right? And so this begins to spread, and that's where you see things linked to eczema usually for histamine. But any sort of rashes and things like that could be partially explained through an improper histamine release related to this breakdown of the gut into a leaky gut scenario where the cells are just being provoked on a regular basis, the gut immune connection's out of balance, and stuff that's supposed to stay in the gut is not staying in the gut. It's passing through into the gall area, the bloodstream area. And then that's where the immune system just does its job. And if it's called to fight every day, it will, but there's a lot of collateral damage that spreads out to other body parts at that point.
Okay. So what are the most common skin reactions? You mentioned eczema, but is acne part of a histamine response? Or is that more of just typical leaky gut, and hormones, of course, or psoriasis, rosacea, hair loss? What are there things that are not in that list that we talked about originally of side effects, but things that are like other signs where, gosh, because a lot of people are having a lot of skin reactions and skin breakouts, and they don't know where it's coming from.
Well, the skin it's a complex one, right? Because the skin's also a detox organ. And so there's a lot of things that can be going on. I will say that from the literature, from the research literature, we know that there's a direct connection to eczema and histamines. We also know that if you're having like a lot of redness and blotchiness or bumpiness, things of this nature that seem to come and go, this is indicative of some sort of potential histamine reaction. If we're just talking about generalized acne, rosacea, I would wager there's a histamine connection, but I'm not going to say that this is the number one thing you need to address if you have acne or if you have hair loss or if you have rosacea. Rosacea is highly, I think, closely related to eczema, in my opinion, based on the way that they develop and everything. So I do think that's a great linkage that could be explored if you do have rosacea. But again, for people with the hair conditions and for acne, I would be looking more at leaky gut and focus mostly on gut healing. Unless, here's the kicker, unless you show those other annoying symptoms that you've never really pieced together, because that's what happened to me. I never pieced together that from time to time I would get car sick, but never like bad enough that I would have to pull over or anything. I never really pieced together that I can't really drink beer. I would just have these sneezing fits. I can't really, I just didn't piece together all these little details, right? So if you're like, hey, I have acne, but I also get massive mosquito welts, and you're right, I am car sick. Oh, and I do get headaches, I don't know, 6 times a month. And it's not necessarily just around my cycle. Those things start to add up to a picture of oh, here's somebody who's struggling to clear histamine, who's also experiencing a skin condition and may get help for that skin condition by addressing their histamine.
I notice inflammation and water retention. And I mean, that would only make sense because you have this inflammatory response and the body probably holds on to that water to create the fluid for the inflammation. Would that be a correct way in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, right? It's possible. And with, fluid retention is complex as well, because there are a lot of things around electrolytes. And so it gets really complex there. That's not one that I would say like, oh, just take DAO or something and that'll get rid of your water retention. But I think it's a worthy exploration, right? This is a HistaHarmony and the other DAO supplements on the market are like, you can feel pretty safe at home playing with them, and they will either work or they won't work. And that will give you whether or not you should continue on that pathway or not.
And you can't, there's no side effect from taking too much of it if you don't need it.
Correct. It is an enzyme that we make naturally inside of our body. There's no correlation or study or even theory, pathway, any idea about how it might shut down our own internal production. It's basically like we take more and then we'll either use it or excrete it. And so you can, it's been studied in kids. It's been obviously in adults. If you are scared, if you have a concern, obviously check with your doctor. But in general, it's a very well studied product, and it's been studied in all different ages and body types and things like that.
So before we move on, I just want to list the most common high histamine foods so you can have that aha moment with maybe something healthy in your diet is causing the issue. Alcohol, and that's not one of the healthy ones. Fermented foods, the aged foods, fish and shellfish, bone broth. How many people are doing bone broth cleanses and they wonder why they're not working? Dairy, grains, avocado. Avocado is the perfect food, right? I can't eat avocado because of the histamines. Tomatoes, soy, eggplants, which I'm so bummed about, oranges, strawberries, and of course the vinegars. You go to the restaurant, you're trying to avoid the canola oil and the salad dressing, so you get the vinegar and oil dressing, and you're going to have a different set of problems. Am I missing any of the high offenders, Stephen?
I think vinegars are usually up there as well. But yeah, no, if it's, unfortunately, chocolate can be up there. Anything that's like aged, right? And oftentimes if it has a complex, delicious flavor, it'll be on that list.
And leftovers, they're aged, right?
Right,
Leftovers are high histamine, which is such a bummer because it makes cooking so quick and easy, right? So, okay, so we want to talk about the difference between your HistaHarmony and other DAO enzymes. There's so many out there. Do they all work? Are they the same thing? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of differences out there, and I wouldn't have brought this product to market if I hadn't been highly convinced by the people who created it in Spain. They have 96 patents around the world. They've run over 10 human trials on the product. They really have been focused just on this product for the last, I think, 12 years. And so I actually have been publicly not recommending any DIO supplementation for almost my entire career because of the spotty results, basically, that I would get with the other products. They're very inconsistent from person to person, condition to condition. And it just felt like a lot of money to spend to only help like 1/4 of everybody who tried it. So what I found as I dove into this is like, you can either get the DAO from pig extraction. Pigs make the most amount of DAO of anything that we know of. And then some people try to extract it from legumes. Unfortunately, the legume extraction process is it's even more complex than the pig extraction. And it seems to be like really easy to lose its capacity to work. And so there are some vegan and vegetarian DAO products in the market. I do not recommend them. If I was going to recommend a competitor's product, it would always be a pig-based product. I think the extraction process to really preserve the DAO from the legumes and not pull out any toxins or anything else is still a few years away, unfortunately, for people who are vegan and vegetarians. And then when it comes to the pig extraction process, there's a couple proprietary extraction processes, and these guys, the various brands keep this stuff like on lockdown. So I don't even know all the steps that go into the one that we use. So you have different types of extractions, but then you also have to preserve it when you take it. And so unfortunately, DAO is really sensitive to the air, and it's really sensitive to stomach acid. And so if during the bottling, the encapsulation, all of that stuff, if you're introducing oxygen in there, you're going to start to decay it and break it down. And then I personally don't believe it works as well unless you protect it from the stomach acid. So ours has an enteric coating to protect it from the stomach acid, and it comes in a blister pack that's nitrogen flushed, so you don't lose any of its capacity.
Here you go. I've never seen a product packaged like this, and it's amazing. Everyone is individually packaged, so it's away from oxygen and everything you're just talking about. So the other histamine supplements I've taken in the past come in a normal bottle. You take the lid off and you pour it out and you put the lid back on, but of course oxygen gets in there and it's exposed.
Yeah. And so that's why I think, if you had to say, like, why did you even, in general, if you read the reviews of our product, I would say 50% of them are, oh my gosh, this actually does work compared to the other brands I've been buying, which I wasn't sure if they were working or they kind of worked. And I would say, how do you explain that, right? Because I don't think those other brands are like trying to build junky products. I think it's because they're not protecting it from the oxygen. Like you said, when you open the bottle, I think it's probably a really good product. Unfortunately, every time you open that bottle and interact with it, you're introducing more oxygen and more exposure for it to slowly decay the ability for the DAO to work. And then the other thing is that we're the only ones that I know of that have a true enteric coating on it to protect it from stomach acid. So if you take a product that is broken down by stomach acid and it does not come in an enteric coating, you're going to lose some percentage of that. Like, let's say you had 100 units of stuff in there, you're going to lose some percentage, whether it's 50 units, 75 units, 25 units, you're going to lose that to the stomach acid. And then that would explain the individual results, right? Some people's stomach acid is killing more or less. Some bottles are exposed to more oxygen or less oxygen. And you get this really complex result where you can't really count on it. And so that's what HistaHarmony, I think, solves for. Is, yes, it's backed by science and patents and all the work that they've done, but we tried to eliminate the variables that come with actual absorption through the gut with the enteric coating, and we tried to eliminate the fact that the stuff does break down if it's exposed to oxygen.
So when you're taking the HistaHarmony, it says to take it about 20 minutes before a meal if you're going to take it for the meal, and that's the purpose of it. Why do we not just take it with our food like every other enzyme?
So what you're trying to do is you're trying to front load a response from the mast cells. So you're trying to have a surplus of DAO kind of like ahead of the food. Like, so if you front load the DAO, it's kind of at the front of the hose, I guess, if you will. And then you're putting more stuff in that hose, which is the food and the drink that you're drinking. And as soon as that other food hits the small intestine, there's a possibility for the mast cells to start releasing histamine. If the DAO is already there in front of it and present, there's a higher chance that it's going to be able to break that down faster. And so that's why it's recommended to take it that way. It doesn't mean that you can't take it at the end of a meal or the middle of the meal. I got to be honest. I'm, number one, just know that I do not identify as having a large amount of histamine problems. Like I said, I've been a histamine denier for a long time. I do experience them. So I do take one, but I usually take it at the end of the meal. That being said, we have people who are very histamine intolerant, and they notice a dramatic effect if they take it 10 to 20 minutes before they start eating.
Okay, so I want to go through all of the supplements in the order of how to take them, because these gut supplements have been game changers for me. How long ago, when I was in the hospital, tubes up me, around me, down me, the GI doctor says, oh, you've got IBS, go take some Metamucil. They did nothing for me. And since then, I've been on the search for the right enzymes to get rid of my bloat, spent thousands and thousands of dollars on things that don't work. Finally, I have a formula. And so I want to make sure that you guys, because I know so many people are suffering from gut issues. I use my Leaky Gut Bundle, so the Megaspore, Mega Pre, and Mega Mucosa, to help heal the leaky gut and help with the microbiome and the right bugs in my gut. Okay, so that's number one. But then before my meal, I have my HistaHarmony. I take 2. I don't know why I take 2. I just take 2. So you can comment on the dosage. in a minute. I take that before my meal. I'm always cooking, so I take it while I'm cooking. And then with my meal, I take 2 HCl Guard. Oh my God, this has been a game changer. Like I said, I would get E. coli, salmonella every other month. And it was like, oh, do you have food poisoning again, Sarah? Yeah, I do, unfortunately. Well, this has been a game changer for that. And I feel like my food is just disintegrating and going to everywhere it needs to go in my body really quickly. And it's not just sitting there. I hate the fact that people are taking Ozempic so that there's slow movement or emptying of the stomach. I'm like, get the food out of my tummy so I can start using the nutrients for my energy. So that HCl Guard is amazing. And I take it with my holozyme enzymes that are activated enzymes, different from any other, the only ones that have ever worked for me. So that is well, wait, I've got one more and we'll talk about it in a second. The Tributyrin X I take with my meal. So can you comment on, am I doing things right, wrong, dosage, and am I in the game with what I'm trying to do?
Oh, you're definitely in the game. I mean, you're changing your symptoms, you're changing your longer horizon symptoms, like for instance, like not getting sick anymore on a monthly basis, those types of things. That all indicates that you're getting stronger. You're not having like daily bloat. It sounds like you're feeling good enough to try foods you haven't tried in years with the eggplant thing. So that all suggests that you are healing, you're feeling good, you're trying things that you had written off. And so whenever that's happening, I'm all like, whatever that person's doing, as long as it's not like, hey, I'm doing heroin and cocaine, like I'm like, that maybe we should talk about that. But in this case, this is a very good supplement stack. And, that's all suggesting that you're healing whatever was all the different layers of things that were going on. It would be that if you had other complaints that you wanted to continue to work on, then we could talk about like changing dosages. But I mean, you got you're supporting your organs with the healthy gut products. You're supporting your microbiome through the microbiome labs products. So, I mean, I feel like you've got a lot of your bases covered. And the only way that I would suggest changing dosages or products is if you just were like, hey, I really want to eat eggplant, or it's not just eggplant, it's like eggplant, avocado, and chocolate and all those different things. And I want those things back. So like, okay, cool. Let's work on a plan to get that going. So I think that's where, people are in different phases of healing, and they oftentimes will be like, well, am I doing it right? And I'm like, well, the only person that can answer that is you. Are you getting the result? Are you happy with the results you have? And if you're happy with those results, then don't judge it right now. And in 6 months from now, if life changes and you're like, I want red wine and I haven't been able to have red wine in 5 years, then cool. Let's try to figure out why you can't tolerate red wine and figure out a plan for that. But I think it's, it'd be improper for me to say you're doing it wrong because you sound like you're doing it right and you enjoy how you feel.
So can you front load with DAO enzymes and like take it at a therapeutic or a higher dose for a week to, make sure that you've got it stored up into your body and it's there for later use? Or is it in and out of your body on a daily basis?
There's nothing to suggest that you would be storing it that I'm aware of. So, but you could do like a histamine detox, if you will, or try to like lower your circulating levels of histamine. So you could try to, like 4 pills per day for 7 days and just see if 4 pills plus you take a pill with every meal or something, and just see how you feel. And then go off the 4 extra per day and see how you feel. That is basically a theory I have, is that we have, just like people are familiar with like an inflammation bucket, where like, you tolerate a certain level of inflammation. If you get too close to the top of the bucket, one more little drop, whether it's a bad day with your spouse or the kids have something, or you get exposed to some nasty building on accident, and then boom, everything flares up. You lose the rest of your day. I think the same is true with histamine. And so if you're doing things that are regularly lowering your histamine load such that you're away from the top of that bucket, I think it will allow you more ability to move around in the world. And whether that's try eggplant or try red wine or, whatever it might be. And so that's where taking it in between meals or trying to do like a really like a specific 7-day sort of cleanse or detox type thing could be really beneficial. And I think it's worth a try for folks that are saying yes to a lot of the symptoms we're talking about here today.
Lifestyle, stress, sleep, exercise, they affect everything. I mean, they cause leaky gut if you're mismanaging your sleep and your stress is out of control, which most people's are, or if you're not exercising. Can you talk about how stress, sleep, and exercise affect histamine in either a positive or negative way?
Yeah. So again, histamine is an equation, right? We're going to make it every day and we want that. And we should be making a similar amount of DAO every day to break that amount down. We could do things like drink alcohol or be really stressed, and that's going to lower the production of DAO. And it's also going to raise the amount of histamine that's made that day. And so when this imbalance gets off, this differential between my hands that I'm kind of putting up in the air right now, that's going to be felt, right? And for some people that might feel that a pain over here, blotchy skin over there, a headache, I don't know. And so lifestyle factors contribute greatly. Number one, we know that your nervous system is very important for regulation of histamine pathways. So if you can do things to support your nervous system, whether that's grounding every day, whether that's breathing, whether that's some sort of incantation or something around like, I am safe, everything is okay, everything will be fine, everything's working out. All these things are ways to help your body, your nervous system. Just remember that it is okay to be in the world. And for a lot of us, including myself at times, I can be prone to anxiety and I can just get spinning and just forget that no matter what's happening, everything's okay. So that's a big thing. If you get too far into the sympathetic dominance, you don't have those things. You have an undercurrent of fear through your whole life. You're afraid of the next virus. You're afraid of the presidential election. You're afraid of whatever. All of that stewing is going to be kicking up different pathways that are going to contribute to histamine intolerance, whether it's too much cortisol and thinning out your mucosal membrane, all different types of things. Same thing with exercise. If you can walk every day, let alone exercise, that's going to be very helpful to, number one, making your microbiome thicker and more diverse, which then protects your mast cells and reduces the amount of histamine that's expressed, to just being out in the world and encouraging the body to get aware of different smells and different things that are out there. Like one of the things is you can actually put yourself in too much of a bubble and then everything is offensive to that bubble. Like if you're like have an air purifier on you like every second of every day and you got an ionizer and you got a this and a that, you actually create this false bubble around yourself and your body can get used to that as well. And then you run into a plant or a flower or something and it's like, whoa, and it gets mad about it. So exercise, very good for the nervous system as well. There's plenty of literature that says that we just need to move as these creatures that we are. It's really helpful for our parasympathetic and our nervous system. And then the trying to be okay on a daily basis. So anything that can make sleep better, anything that helps you move your body more and helps you be mobile and fit. And then anything that is just helping you be okay in today's crazy world with everything that we have going on. Those are all going to reduce the amount of histamines that are expressed on a daily basis. And they're pretty much going to help with everything. It doesn't matter if you want a better microbiome, if you want better stomach acid, if you want more enzymes, if you want, more happiness. Like I don't care what you want. Those are kind of core foundationals that if you spend time and money on them, you'll be rewarded.
Absolutely. And it only makes sense because if you're stressed and you're not sleeping, your cortisol's up, you're in fight or flight. You don't know if you just had a fight with your husband or if you're, facing a famine for 4 months and you don't know if you're going to be able to eat. So your whole system is on high alert. which means there's high histamine ready to respond, right? Inflammation ready to respond. The gut becomes leaky, the brain, brain fog, and the adrenals get burned out, and all of these things, it's like a cascade of issues that just feed off of one another, and it only gets worse. And that's why a lot of these symptoms are symptoms of high stress and of other issues. Your body will become more insulin resistant as a survival mechanism. All of these things are connected. So I really am glad that you touched on all of that, Stephen. I'm going to save for our next interview your talk on Tributyrin X. That's the next one, which I'm using it. I'm cautious because of my own concerns, my own, it make you more constipated, more diarrhea. We'll talk all about that. But from what I hear, it gives you more regularity in a healthy way, which most people need. Everyone is suffering from constipation or diarrhea. That's a huge issue within my clientele. So super excited to get into that. And just a little tip for all of you who've been following me for forever. Guess what's antihistamine? Iodine. Acceleridine iodine is something, it's not just going to help with your thyroid and your brain fog and cleansing the cells of all the toxins, helping build that cell membrane with the iodine that's needed for the cell membrane, devitalizing all of the foreign pathogens, but it's antihistamine too. So that's something else you can take. So, Stephen, are we missing anything before you go?
No, I don't think so. I mean, just know that histamine's real. Histamine intolerance is super real, and so is mast cell activation. And while we can do a lot with DAO enzyme to help with it, and we can use antihistamines and things like that, at the end of the day, a lot of that's coming from a damaged gut lining. And so using things like Tributyrin X, mega spore biotic, mega prebiotic, these types of things are going to help recover the villi. They're going to help recover the various layers of the leaky gut and the microbiome. And then things like Tributyrin X are going to help recover the oxygen gradient and help repair that part of the gut. And so together, combined, you can really rebuild the overactivation and the histamine intolerance. So just remember that it's sort of like a process. It's not a one size fits all, even though we did talk about some fun ways to use HistaHarmony should you get seasick this summer out on the boat or something.
Oh my goodness. I was on semester at sea as a college student, and we were in 10-foot waves, and there was Dramamine packets tied to the side of each hallway because so many people were seasick and people were throwing up everywhere. I should have just had the HistaHarmony and handing that out. Who knew? But
yeah, Dramamine's an antihistamine. That's how it works.
Absolutely. So everyone, you can find all of the supplements we've talked about. The HistaHarmony, like I said, it's in this wonderful packaging. You won't lose it, right? The HCL Guard, the Holozyme, these have been game changers for me. The Tributyrin X and the Leaky Gut Bundle, the Mega Spore, Mega Pre, and Mega Mucosa. All of those are on Accelerated Health Products, so you can check them out there. So thanks, Stephen. Excited to have you back on to dive more into the Tributyrin X next time. And thanks everyone else for tuning in today. If you need my help, you don't know where to start, you're overwhelmed, just reach out to me at sarabantahealth.com. Happy to put together a protocol for you, and join my free group coaching on Telegram. There's no downside. I share daily tips and tools to enhance your health, answer your questions, and you'll be surrounded by amazing people who are on a similar path. There's more information on the website. And don't forget to follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products. You can catch this podcast on over 100 platforms, including Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Just search for Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. You need to help me spread the healing message to everyone who needs to listen and hear it, and not those that don't, because some people aren't ready. You can help me by sharing this podcast and any other podcast that you find hits home with you, with some friends or family members. Remember, I'm live every Monday and Tuesday. A bonus one is posted Thursdays, and you can use coupon WELCOME10 to get 10% off your first order if you want to try out any of these gut supplements. Thanks again for joining us here, and have a great week.